Good morning. I'd like to call the May 15th, 2018 Community Service Committee meeting to order. Could I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Seroy?
Present.
Ms. Weber? Mr. Stauffenberg? Mr. Vickery? Mr. Tholen? Ms. Polk? Mr. Snipes? Mr. Hildebrand? Ms. Evans? Mr. Payton? Ms. Peters? Ms. Dunbar? Ms. Parker? Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Wheeler? Mr. Lear? We have a quorum.
Okay, do I have any public comment this morning? Any public comment? Seeing none, I need an approval for the April 17th, 2018 minutes. Mr. Stauffenberg and Mrs. Peters with a second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Okay. I'd like to invite up the assessor, Mr. Eric Blair. You're next, Lori. Second. It's okay. I need a motion and a second for approval of Mr. Blair's monthly report. Mrs. Polk and Mr. Payton with a second. All in favor? All opposed? Monthly report. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? Got just a few things to go over with you this morning to let you know about the activity of the office in the last few weeks and what we look forward to coming up in the next month or two. So one of the biggest things that we did in the last few weeks was to try to maintain the ownership of record and the tax bill mailing address for the tax bills which were mailed out and hit the mailboxes here in the second week of May. I think it was about May 8th or 9th that they hit the mailboxes. So we did have our name and addresses maintained and updated through Thursday, April 26th. April 26th, and I believe Nick Africano created that file on Friday the 27th. So we were right up against when he created the file. So we were as updated as we could be, which is something that I try to stress, and we try to stress down there to make sure that as many of the tax bills are going where they should be as possible. So we did complete that. Along with that, we also did enter all of the pre-C of E's. A C of E is a certificate of error where we know that a correction needs to be made to a bill, whether it's a value correction, an error in fact, not an error in judgment, or an exemption needs to be added or removed from the bill. If we do it early enough, the taxpayer only sees the correct bill. They don't see two different bills. So we try to do that and keep that caught up as much as possible so that the taxpayer only sees the corrected bill up front. Now that the bills are already out, if anything gets corrected from here on out, they're going to have the old bill which was incorrect, and we will then ask the treasurer to issue a corrected bill, so they'll actually have two bills. So we try to clean it up as much as possible up front. We did the best we could with that. We had a typical year of I want to say it was about 200 pre-C of E's that we put in the system beforehand. Those are, it sounds terrible, but it's really just someone forgot to come in and get their senior freeze, somebody forgot to come in and get their disabled person exemption, and they did it, let's say, in January or February, and we needed to do a correction to make that right. So it's really not as bad as it sounds, but that is a typical volume this time of year, a couple hundred of them. So the other big thing that happened this month is I did receive right at the end of April, on schedule with what the Department of Revenue tries to do. They gave me the 2019 certified PI values for the farmland, which now allows me to hold my Farmland Assessment Review Committee meeting. So I have not set that up yet, but I do plan to in the next few days look at a calendar and pick a date that makes sense for our Farmland Assessment Review Committee to come in. They do need to vote for me to accept those values as presented by the Department of Revenue. I don't see any issue with that. If we didn't accept those values, it would be extremely expensive for us to come up with our own, and I just don't see that happening. So, but it's a procedural matter that'll need to be done, and we'll do that probably in early to mid-June. I would assume probably by the time I see you again in June, that will already have been completed. So, along with that, then I go into what is pending, and the first thing on the list is to schedule that Farmland Assessment Review Committee meeting. So we'll go ahead and do that in the next few weeks. I'm still waiting on the Department of Revenue to send me a detailed sales list for 2017, so we can reconcile that for the 3-year sales ratio study. They are a bit behind this year. We got ours April 26th last year, and I'm still waiting for it now this year. They may just be a little behind. I know they've got some staffing issues down there, and some people gone for various reasons, so I'm not quite alarmed yet, but I would tell you that I believe no one in the state has gotten their detailed sales list either. So we're no further behind than anybody else. They did contact us last week and asked us about some sales that occurred on December 22nd. So I think they're getting closer to being done with our study, and then we'll go ahead and reconcile that and move forward. So I feel like that by the time I see you again in June, that'll probably be done as well. Of course, this time of year also, we're looking for the return of assessment books from the townships. It's a little bit early to be saying that now. Typically, we don't have them in the middle of May, but in the next 6 to 8 weeks, I would expect that we would have most of those books and numbers turned into us so that we can start to work on equalization and things as we move into publication all the way. I'm talking all the way out into September. So that's kind of the schedule and the way it goes. You have to be aware of those things in the spring so that we make sure we're ready in the summer and fall to get those things accomplished. The last thing I wanted to bring to your attention today was just a little bit of an update on the solar energy legislation, which now we started out with House Bill 5284. That was referred to, and I'm going to get this wrong, but it was like the Rules Committee, which basically means that it died. But that's okay because industry had introduced a bill of their own, and we had agreed on a lot of language. It's Amendment 2 of Senate Bill 486, and that is moving pretty quickly here. It's had its first reading. It got assigned to the Revenue Committee, and we expect that it will be on the floor for a second reading and potentially a third reading, and it may actually get done. The only thing left to resolve is what is the proper dollar amount per megawatt for the assessed value in the formula. So other than that, we agree to all of the other framework, and we're anxiously awaiting what the legislature will do with that value. So that's everything I had for you this morning. I'll open the floor to questions, please.
Mr. Snipes?
Thank you, Eric. I was approached by several property owners, and then I even got my tax bill in the mail. And to my dismay, it was $400 higher.
Okay.
And theirs was even higher. And I understand that if you don't receive a tax bill, I mean, not a tax bill, but a tax statement by the tax time where you can appeal,
The
that
assessment change notice?
there will be there's no difference in your bill up to a percentage. But if no one receives a notice that they're going up by $300, $400, and then some people as high as $600 or $700, and they get that surprise in the mail when they finally get their tax bill, what is that attributed to, and where is this great increase? And I don't know if it's around the areas, it's just only in the Kankakee City area that has been done.
Sure, I can address this a couple different ways, and there's no definitive answer until if I were to look at a particular tax bill and try to tell you, what happened. It could be as simple. I'm sorry, can you not hear? It could be as simple as just the value increased or the tax rate increased. But it could be, and it happens sometimes. I talked to someone the other day, not from Kankakee City, but from a more rural part of the county, whose exemption was removed for one reason, and then they requalified for it. So while their bill went up $400, and I explained, well, now you can go ahead and get that exemption again. They came in, they got the exemption. We did a certificate of error on that one, and they will get a corrected bill, which will bring it down to basically what they were used to in the prior year. So in certain instances, it can be rectified if it has to do with a missing exemption that should be there. But it's hard for me to say when you say you have several examples. Each one is a little different, so I'd have to look at each one and see. But you are correct. This is the time. This is not a time of year where you can object to the value unless you feel like your assessment is based on something that is not true. For example, if you feel like, if you know that your home has a crawl space and you're being assessed for a basement, that is something that can be fixed. That's an error in fact in the value. But if you just feel like the value is too high, we can't accept an appeal on that basis at this point of the year. That needs to be done in the fall. Going back to what you said, if they weren't notified, I would again encourage anyone to make themselves aware of newspaper publications in around August or September when we do that. If they don't get the newspaper, I would encourage them to call us and find out when we plan to publish. Because if you don't get that notice in the mail, that doesn't mean that your 30-day window didn't start. And it doesn't mean that it won't stop like it did last year on October 17th. If you didn't file an appeal by then, you missed the window to object to your value. Of course, at that point of the year, you don't know what the tax bill is going to be, and that's the tricky part. You're not actually filing an appeal against the tax bill. You're filing an appeal against the assessed value itself. The bill has so many different factors to it, being exemptions, and that's why I wanted to come around to that part of the conversation, as well as the appropriate and legal rate that's cut by the clerk's office. The rate has nothing to do with anything that we do in the assessment office. I mean, it's a function of total assessed value in a district versus how much is legally extended to that taxing body. But that's a whole nother can of worms that'd probably take an entire day to talk about.
Right.
Does that address your?
Well, it does. And my concern was that they should have been notified around the time that generally everyone receives a notice before for that appeal window. And they were on the assumption that if they didn't receive the notice, that their tax wouldn't be changed but be the same. But the other caveat to that is, for the record, since they are taping it, just say your number for the record, and they should be able to get it off of the podcast or the video.
I'm sorry, which
Your
number?
phone number.
The number to your office,
Oh, sure.
so they can.
Absolutely. If you dial 815-937-2945, that is our office, and you can reach the phone queue to get into two or three different people that would be answering those phones and addressing each matter individually. 815-937-2945 if you missed it the first time.
Just like a commercial. Mr. Lear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The tax bill has a new format, and I know that was, I think, the responsibility more of the treasurer, so
Sure.
I may need to address that to him. But I've had some landlords indicate when they looked at their tax bill, they didn't see the common address listed on the tax bill. Do you know, is it on there?
That is true. It is not. From what I've seen, the tax bill mailing address is on there, but the site address of the property, which very well may be different from where you decide to have it mailed, the site address was not on there. I think that may have been an oversight by the treasurer. I don't want to speak for him. He did choose a different layout this year, for various reasons. So there are some things that are different. I think that the site address, I think he'd even agree, probably needs to be added back in there. It's a little confusing to people who might own 10 different rental properties, and you're not sure which parcel which goes to which site address based on the information on that bill. But that's probably a question, like you said, that's best addressed with Mr. Africano. That's for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Blair? I noticed that the tax bills, if you had multiple parcels, they came in one envelope this year, which I think saved us some postage.
Yeah, that's
which-
that's a good point, and I plan to try to do something like that with the assessment change notices as well. If
Yeah.
you've got multiple parcels that are going to one mailing address, I'd like to see us save a little bit on the postage that way. So that was something that Nick worked out, and when he brought it to my attention, I couldn't believe we hadn't been doing that for
Right.
quite a while. I think we did it in the past when we used to send out our assessment change notices to be handled by a third party, and then when we got that internal machine, I think that might have ceased. Now that we don't have the machine and I'm going to send it out to a third party, I'm going to do what I can to see if we can mail as many out in what they call, I think they call group mailing, as much as possible.
Mr. Vickery.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Personally, I like the tax bill. I understand the address issue. I think the parcel number's on it, though.
It is a couple of different times, actually.
Yeah, but I like the tax bill, and it's probably in evolution. Okay,
Sure.
it's going to change a little as we go and add
course.
some things. So,
It
but
always does.
I like the first step that Mr. Africano made. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Blair? Have a great day, Eric. Thank you.
Have a great day, folks. Thanks a lot.
And 3 on. Yeah. Next up is the recorder, Miss Lori Gadbois. I need a motion and a second to approve her monthly report. Miss Dunbar and Mrs. Peters with a second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Good morning, Lori.
Morning. Any questions on the report at all? So my first question actually to the committee is, do you want to keep receiving the information this way? Is it understandable? Interesting? Fact-finding? Okay, I just want to make sure,
I like the breakout.
okay.
You know, unless you
was-
want to do it a different way. And
It was done a previous way, and about 10 years ago, a county board member had asked for this information. I've been providing it ever since. I just didn't know if there was something maybe new you wanted to see. This works for you?
Mr. Vickery.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Lori, I think it's good because it kind of, you can look at the comparisons month to month, and I think that's kind of interesting to see.
In 3 years. I
Yeah.
do a 3-year
Yeah.
comparison.
So, thank you.
Okay, all right, very good. Just some other updated information about the recorder's office. First of all, we participated in Law Week with KCC in the paralegal program on May 3rd, which was really interesting, and it was a nice invitation to receive promoted property fraud alert. I was able to bring our little kiosk iPad with me and have people sign up right there, which was pretty cool. So kind of on the road promoting property fraud alert. The other thing I wanted to bring to your information is we continue as we do our daily work. We continue working on backlog. Currently, we have 31 years available online.
Awesome.
So kind of one of my goals is to have 50 years. That's a pretty decent search for anyone wanting to do something, finding some base information on a certain property. So we continue to plug away and work on that. With that, we are working on film from 1970 because it has actually gotten the vinegar syndrome. So we had to pull that out of the drawers. So We are currently, there's 8,602 records for 1970. We have 1,061 completed. That means filmed, indexed, and in the system. So we continue to plug away at that. Another bit of information for your information. To date, we've had 4,902 records recorded since January 1st. Of those, 2,261 have been electronically recorded, which is a huge savings to the county because we are not mailing back and forth those records back to the people. So they electronically come in and they electronically go back. So almost half of our recordings, it's been about a third. We're getting up to a half now, which is pretty exciting, seeing that industry is participating that way with us, and we're able to really capture and get good information into our system then a lot quicker. So we're pretty excited about that. We continue to be busy in my office, and with that, I'll entertain any other questions about the recorder's office, what we're doing. We'll be promoting Property Fraud Alert again next month at a senior event. So excited about that.
Mr. Snipes.
You might be already doing this, but the cable access television that they have on Channel 4, do you have it up on there as well?
Is that Comcast?
Yeah, I think
Oh.
it is.
I
Yeah.
just went back to Comcast,
Well, the
so I'm
city
not
of
up on everything Comcast
Yeah,
is.
but the city of Kankakee does. You just send it to there's a representative of the city of Kankakee, and they put it on the public assets channel. So I was just thinking.
I'll look into that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
No, sure. I'd love to be able to promote this more and more.
Yes.
Talk to
thanks.
Mr. Wheeler because I think he's trying to get this broadcast on that channel. So,
But
we
is
might have
it
some
like a
contact.
ribbon at the bottom promoting
Yes,
Property
yeah.
Fraud Alert? Is that what you're talking
No,
about?
it'll be actual. I mean, all you do is you set it up as far as the information. You give it to the, you can call Angelita and she'll tell you the name of the guy, and then they put it on. That's what they do with everybody, fire, whatever, long as it's a public information.
Rolls. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'll look into that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's public access.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's a very cool idea. Thank you. More we can get it out there. Anything else?
Any other questions, Ms. Gamble?
One more thing, the little concern about tax bills, because my office too has received some phone calls. For your information and to share with anyone who would question you, yes, the PIN number is on the tax bill as well as the legal description. But if they go to the treasurer's website, the image that comes up on the website still shows the site address. So they punch the PIN in, bring it up, and they'll be able to figure out what tax bill goes with what property. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else?
Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, next up is the clerk, Dan Hendrickson, and I need a motion and a second to approve his monthly report. Mrs. Evans with the first and Mr. Lear with the second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Morning, Dan. Morning, Lori. 1 and 2. You're all on.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Okay. Just so we get this out of the way, 815-937-2990.
That's the clerk hotline.
Not 24/7. Yeah. Just a few things to bring to your attention. I'll try to be as cognizant of your time as I can. I have an old fax machine from, possibly 1999, 2000 or so that we had over in the Vital Records area. It gave up the ghost, and I need to have it disposed.
Mrs. Dunbar with the, and Miss Dunbar and Mr. Payton with a second to dispose of the This is not an auction item. This is.
Oh, no.
This is junk.
No.
To throw it in the dumps. Throw it away. Okay.
Take it down to Oaken entrance, right?
Do we don't need a roll call for that.
No, we're not spending.
All
any
in
money.
favor? All opposed? Thank you.
Next on the list would be we're going to change a polling place out in Rockville. Our current polling place is the Rockville Township Garage, and it's been, a long time since we've had that polling place. We've had some judges that have had some, for lack of a better word, some complaints about, it is a garage where there's diesel equipment in there and the smell lingers. We found a church that's right on the border. Lori, the name of that church? People's Church, I forgot. Is right on 1000 West Roads in the township. We've gone to explore the facility. It would be huge. Plenty of space. They want us there. So we would like to relocate the Rockville Township garage, or the Rockville Township polling place, to the church that's on 1000.
Mr. Fairfield.
I'd like to make the motion.
Mr. Fairfield with a motion. Mr. Stauffenberg with a second. All in favor of moving the Rockfield polling place to People's Church, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. The polling place change in Essex, I'd like to kick till the next meeting. The Essex Village Hall is the current polling place. We've gotten some concerns from the judges saying that as far as size of that, it's a little bit tight on the bigger elections. The Lions Club would work as a facility. I want to have options, take a look at that building just to make sure that it is ADA accessible, and I wasn't able to get that scheduled in time for this meeting. So with your indulgence, I would like to move that to possibly the next county board meeting. Okay.
He doesn't need a motion for that, I don't.
Right, I'm not asking for any action on that. Election judge certification, every 2 years, we do send out, notice to those judges that want to continue to work, and also to the precinct committeemen. We ask them if they can find us judges. Basically, we're just asking for your approval. It'll go to county board and then to the courts. Lori, do you want to speak to that process on what we do?
Once this list is approved, and what we'll do is we'll contact all the judges, certify them through the early fall, late summer, early fall, and then they'll be certified to work the next 2 years cycle of elections. And then as elections come up and we need more, we do supplement lists.
So on the election notice,
Sorry, Mr. Snipes.
so on the election notices, that's sending out to the precinct committeemen or women, there is some judges on that's currently serving. Do they know who's?
We provide the precinct committeemen with the list for, here's the judges that have previously worked in that precinct.
Okay.
But we do ask the precinct committeemen to contact those judges to confirm that they wish to work.
Continue. Okay.
Right.
Good. Thank you.
So we need approval.
A motion
with the
to
list.
approve the list, okay? Mrs. Polk with a first and Mr. Fairfield with a second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, before we get into the precinct consolidation PowerPoint, I just did want to touch base with you to let you know, I received an email from the clerk recorder's representative about legislation that has passed the House Senate and is going to be heard by the House Elections Committee this Thursday. It's an omnibus bill. Some of the points of note on here will allow election authorities to reduce the number of election judges at a polling place from 5 to 3. Another option, and then there's more in here, but I'm just trying to get to the major points. Write-in candidates who are running for election have to file between 106 days and 60 days prior to election day. We do have some already for people that wanted to run for various offices, governor being the one. President seems to draw a lot of people out in those. But it does also specify that those that are running for those offices for president and governor, because they have to have a running mate, must include a running mate on their write-in candidacy. The third one, and this was a big issue for us in 2016, those entities that are sending out applications to vote by mail, we noticed this a lot in 2016, that they're not asking the applications to be returned back to our office, they're being sent to a clearinghouse. I think you can see the problems that can be associated with that, because they could possibly sit there for days and weeks, and we noticed that we had some that were weeks old, and at early voting time, timing is critical on that. So that would establish that anybody who sends those out, any third-party entities that send those out, are required to have postage paid on that, sent directly back to the election authority's office. So I just wanted to touch base with you on that. Our precinct consolidation. Chairman Wheeler at the last community services meeting asked me if I could put together some information. So I've done so. My goodness, that's small. I just wanted to let you know the methodology that I chose to do when we were doing this. I had looked at if there were 800 ballots cast at a polling place as the maximum threshold. 800 was the number chosen because in state law there is something that says if you vote over 800 at the polling place, 2 consecutive general elections, you have to split the polling place. So there is some talk about that legislation increasing that number to 1,200, but at this point right now it's 800. And the figures that I used for the calculations are for the ballots that were cast at the polling place for both the 2014 and the 2016 elections. There are some that we had that met that threshold, but because of other reasons, we had a sufficient number of judges, we're not including those. So these are some that we're having for discussion purposes. Aroma precincts 2 and 3, I think you can see those boundaries fairly well. That is Journey Church is Aroma 3's polling place, and Aroma 2 is Goslin Park. You see there, if we combined those two, the total number of registered voters would be 1,260. Votes cast at the polling place in the presidential election, there were 738, and in 2014 there were 668. Underneath that, you'll see the number of election judges that we had working at both of those. We had 3 at each of those. That's a concern for us. The plus side is that, there were those 2 to be consolidated, there'd be no ballot style changes. So what the voters get for this election is what they would have for the same election. So there would, as far as the judges being able to do this, it would be transparent to them. Okay. Next one, auto. I've got auto, both auto 1 and 3 and auto 2 and 3 in here as options. I'd like to sit on that for a little bit if it's the pleasure of the committee. If this legislation passes, we might want to look at possibly combining all 3 of the auto precincts and possibly moving those to the fairgrounds. So I do have the numbers there for auto 1 and 3. Total number of voters, if you could flip back to auto 1 and 3.
Nope.
Light hand on the throttle, Lori. In 2016, those 2 combined, 459 ballots cast and 407 for the 2014 election. If we were to do auto 2 and 3, and I think logistically that might be, if we were only looking to combine 2 and auto, might work better. 579 in 2016 and 452 in 2014. But I kind of like to sit on that if we could for a year. If you want to go to the next one. Norton. Norton has historically been, two of our lowest precincts as far as number of registered voters. Combining those 2 would give us a precinct with a total of 660 voters. we went out, Lori and I looked at the polling place at the, it's the old school. It's now for the fire department out in Reddick. There's tons of space out there, and they would be most welcoming to us. The combined for those two, the 2016 registered voters, 437, and 2014, 378. And for this primary election, we had 3 judges working Norton 1 and 4 judges working Norton 2. Because there are so many villages in there, it will add some ballot styles to the odd year elections. That's a concern. However, the nice thing about our new poll book system is that when you check in a voter, it's automatically going to print out, here's your ballot style. So it eliminates some of that judges having to look things up and determining what ballot style it is. So it's relatively transparent. I think that even while it does add some ballot styles, it's mitigated by the use of the electronic poll books. You want to go to the next one? Kankakee 4 and 5 is one that we can do, but I'd like to maybe sit on that for a year to get some more data. That's the judges that are, Aroma or Kankakee 5 is at Bird Park, and Kankakee 4 is at the health department. We do have trouble finding some judges over on the west side. We did have 5 for Kankakee 5 for the primary election, but we only had 3 at the health department. You do see that the numbers of the ballots cast at the polling place, 2016 was 806, which is over the threshold that I set, but it was marginally so. It's not one of those things that we have to make movement on. I just brought it up for your consideration. Next one is another one where the numbers work, but we have ample judges there. That would be moving those voters that are currently voting at St. Mary's up to the First Church of the Nazarene. The polling place at the First Church of the Nazarene is spacious and could easily absorb those voters. Numbers-wise, as far as people that are voting there, 593 in 2016 and 451 in 2014. It's one we can do. It's not necessarily one that we have to do. The next one. Kankakee 10 and 13. Those are both currently voting at Asbury United Methodist Church. So it's already at one polling place. The judges have told us that, they would prefer to have just one set of judges working there. Numbers-wise, while there's 1,789 registered voters, and that's a lot. If you see at the ballots cast at the polling place for the presidential election, 529 and 447 in 2014. We were only able to get 5 judges that were working there for that precinct. So if we got those same 5 judges to work for future elections, we have no problem at all. But it is one of those areas where we do have difficulty finding election judges. On a separate note, there is it does merge 2 existing precinct committeemen. It's a consideration. Next one, Kankakee 14 and 15. That was one that we had brought to you for the primary election. We had to close the Pioneer Park building because of the water damage. And we moved those to the Housing Authority. We were able to do that. We had 4 judges working in the primary election. It's another area where we have difficulty finding judges. If you look there, you'll see that the ballots cast at the polling place in 2016 is 565, and 2014 519. That was, if you would go to the next one, please, Lori. And our last one, Bourbonnais precincts 4 and 9. That is over at the Exploration Station and at the St. Joseph's Ministry Center in Bourbonnais 9. We've had some judges that are complaining about the size of the polling place in Bourbonnais 9. And you'll see, as far as judges go, we were only able to work 3 judges at the Exploration Station. We were able to find 4 for the primary for Bourbonnais 9. Ballot-wise, 785 voters in 2016, and 594 in 2014. It does add one ballot style. It is a county board split. There are different county board districts, so it would add a ballot style in the even number years, but only in the even number years.
Mr. Snipes.
Going back to 14 and 15, which is back
Pioneer Park and the Housing Authority.
in the Housing Authority. And then I know with 13 and 10, that's my district. So.
Correct.
But I'm probably going to ask that if and when we consider this, that there be a letter drafted so that I can take out to the churches, because I don't want to hear what I heard the last time when we dealt with moving from the senior high rise on Dearborn to the resource center. So I want to make sure that they are fully informed of whether, and I'll be putting one in Pay's hands and anybody else's hand, so that I don't hear when they say we're voting on this that we didn't consider and that they didn't know. So if there's a letter just basically stating, we're looking at combining this, that, and the other workers, and that they have any concerns, please feel free to contact us with your concerns in writing. That way we don't get caught up in the hearsay, I said, or whatever, but in writing. And that way it just is a safeguard for when they do come. And if I don't hear anything, that I'm going to say, I personally hand-delivered these to your churches for them to be read. And I gave one to Pace and any other leader in NAACP or whatever. So that way we don't hear this backlash after the fact. Okay. So just want to state that for the record, so that way I know that.
Sure. And certainly in the one for your district, it would be transparent to the voters. They're going to the same polling place where they were before. So, we can work together if you want to work together on drafting something. If it were these, to pass, absolutely.
Yeah.
It does.
Ms. Dunbar? There you go.
Lucky 13. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Dan. Do any of these, obviously not Kankakee 10 and 13 or 14 and 15, but Aroma, Otto, Norton, do they create any hardships for access in terms of the rural nature of? I don't have that kind of.
No,
I'm looking at Sally and Carolyn. Does that create any kind of hardship?
It's easier to get around in the country than it is to get around in the city.
For Aroma,
no, I just walk everywhere.
For Aroma 2 and 3, the difference between the two existing precincts, the distance between Goslin Park and Journey Church,
maybe a mile.
Okay.
For Norton, for those people that are down in Cabery, it does probably cause them to drive another 3 miles or so.
But it's country.
It's quick.
No, I understand. And that was one of the concerns, and that might have been why we've kept Norton as 2 precincts.
Obviously we want to have full access to everyone.
Correct.
Thank you. I would consider, if for the Mr. Snipes' letter that you're drafting, if we could include that we're looking for judges. Guess maybe he could do some headhunting in those areas, because ultimately that's the reason we try to combine, is because we don't have enough judges for the polling places that we have. So ultimately, the more judges we get, the less combinations we have to have. So.
But on the same token, it's saying if they stay on the threshold, that we consider combining them. So therefore, from those judges that we do have in those areas, it will probably meet the threshold of the 3 that they're contemplating in this. Is it a bill or something that they have?
Senate Bill 2651.
Yeah, so it might work out.
Thank you. Oh, Ms. Evans, number 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the I don't remember which one it was, but the very first one that you showed us, there were only 3 judges, and you said that was on both 14 and 16 year elections.
No, that was for this primary election. I don't have the number of judges that worked in previous elections. So then when you see the number of judges on there, that was
Okay.
how many people worked.
But you said that was a concern,
It is
and
a
obviously, every slide that you have shown since then, can you tell I'm from old school slide? That you have shown every PowerPoint page that you've shown since then has been considerably more, and the amount of voters was less. So how do we increase that three amount to 4 or 5 or whatever you're needing? Kind
Well,
of the
we
same
would-
thing we're saying.
If you can give me an example for,
It was the very first
that would be Aroma 2 and 3?
that you had 3, yes.
Right. Well, we had 3 working at each one of those polling places. So presuming that those 3 judges continue to work, or both sets, I would have 6 judges to choose from. So I would have a full complement of 5, presuming nobody else in that area is interested in serving as a judge. So,
And
does that answer your question?
And 5 would be sufficient to do one combination polling place, so.
Yes.
Mr. Snipes.
But we're looking at the primary, that's going to always be lower because basically that's dealing with your Democrats, Republicans, and if there's another party that's established as far as that's concerned. But the reality would be the general election because that's where your independents and everybody else that don't want to be a participant in declaring themselves will be coming out.
Judges always have to declare their party affiliation.
No, I'm talking about in the numbers of the 800 threshold. When I'm looking at those numbers, you saying that they came out of precinct? I mean, out of the primary.
Those numbers that I've got on there for the numbers that voted at the polling place, that's from the general elections, not
these
for
are
the primary.
Okay, because we're understanding that those are the primary.
Right.
Okay, so these are the.
I'm
general.
looking at maximum numbers here.
Votes
Okay.
casted are from
Votes
general
cast-
elections. The judges are from primaries.
Okay.
Just this last primary.
What
Just
you
want to
said.
clarify, so we'll.
Yeah. Mr. Lear.
The screen on Bourbonnais 4 and 9. You're getting within 15 voters of your 800 in terms of 2016. If we had another big turnout in 2018, you could obviously get to that 800 level pretty easy.
Potentially.
I guess that's one I have a little concern about. I don't know if there are other factors in addition to voter numbers that are motivating it, suggested consolidation.
You know, the concerns that we have when we're addressing this is judges, viability of the existing polling places, and we have had people that have complained about St. Joseph's Ministry Center for that precinct. There aren't a lot of viable polling places in that precinct. So, and whether or not numbers-wise it works. But you'll see if numbers were to continue, it's a number that we only have to worry about for the presidential election. The 2014 election was under 600.
Okay.
And I'm not necessarily looking at all of these as action items. I wanted to provide it for your information. I think that Bourbonnais 4 and 9 is one of those, based on the concern about that polling place, would be one that I would want to take a look at consolidating, but we don't have to.
I think this is perfect information because we're getting an insight into what Dan in his capacity is trying to do going forward. This might not ever happen, but these are possibilities so we're getting in his mind where he's thinking out loud, and we're getting to see what precincts that might be consolidated in some point in time.
The issue is if we're going to consolidate, we are required to do so at the June meeting. So that's why I brought it to your attention today. So we can't revisit this in August or September and say, let's consolidate. If we don't do it, if we don't make motion on this today, we'll need to wait a year. That's at the pleasure of the committee, though.
Mr. Vickery, do you have something to add?
In the case of 4 and 9, Bourbona's 4 and 9, I mean, you would pick up some judges, right? I mean, you would have 5. You could have 5 judges.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if it ran over 800, it wouldn't be a real problem.
I would, right, it would not, if we hit over 800 at the polling place for 2 general elections in a row, then we would have to come back to you and say we need to split this.
Right.
The other thing to think about is that the 2021, we're going to be redistricting, and we'll be drawing new precinct lines and new county board lines and all of that good stuff too. So what we're looking at today would be a solution for the 2018 and the 2020 elections.
Ms. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any of these that you absolutely want a motion on today? Because I'm willing
Are you
to,
asking me for my wish list?
I am,
Okay.
because I'm willing to trust your judgment, and clearly you've backed it up with statistics and done the research, and I'm happy to make the motion if there are some that you really need done before that June meeting.
I would say that on my wish list, Aroma precincts 2 and 3, Norton 1 and 2, Kankakee 10 and 13, Kankakee 14 and 15, Bourbonnais 4 and 9. Those would be the 5.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Yes, ma'am.
That I would make the motion to accept the consolidation of the Aroma Norton polling places, Kankakee 10 and 13, Kankakee 14 and 15, and Bourbonnais 4 and 9, per Mr. Hendrickson's recommendation.
Do we have a second? Mrs. Evans with a second. Now we'll open it up for discussion, if anybody has any discussion on this before we vote. Mr. Snipes?
Until I get the opportunity to speak with those in Kankakee, I am going to amend that motion to exclude Kankakee 10 and 13 and Kankakee 14 and 15 until I have the opportunity to talk with those individuals, till we contact those individuals.
It's her motion. You're
I'm
requesting this.
amending the, no, if I'm talking to amend the motion, I can amend the motion, they can vote upon that, and then if it fails, then you'll go back to your motion.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So with Mr. Snipes' amendment,
Do we have a second on that?
do we have the second on the amendment? Mr. Payton with a second. Okay. On the amendment.
And that's just to approve everyone except for the Kankakee 10, 13, and Kankakee 14 and 15 till we contact those individuals.
What individuals are you going to contact, Mr.
Need to have a discussion with those individuals that have I need the precinct list on those individuals. I need to discuss whether or not, get their input as far as that's concerned before we vote, so I don't deal with that same mess we dealt with when we had the Entourage folks coming up here talking about,
I understand.
right, so I
Okay.
just safeguard that.
Okay. Mrs. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Snipes, I definitely respect your trying to get the information in everyone's hands or as many hands as possible, but I feel that there's always going to be someone, no matter how diligently the efforts are made to get that information out, there's always going to be not just someone, many someones that will not have gotten the information for one reason or another, and it's, we can do whatever we can to get that information out, but
It doesn't.
and going to the churches and going to the areas where might be the biggest collective area that those people might be in, but I think there's only so much that can be done in that situation as far as getting that information out. I mean, every effort should be made, but trust me, I hear it all the time.
I agree. Okay.
Certainly,
Mr.
the point is
Snipes.
well taken, but go ahead.
Well, Mrs. Peters.
Thank you. Could we do each of them separate, so when it came to the board time, that would give you not quite a month to contact people, but then you could say no on this one and no on that one, if they were all separate? It is the worry that they're all together and they'll just get they either all happen or none happen. So I guess the question's for Dan, do we separate them out, or can they be voted on separately at the board meeting?
I think that's at the pleasure of the committee. Certainly, you can.
Look at each one
You
individually.
could, vote today on each one separately, or you could vote at county board on each one separately. That's your pleasure on.
But if we vote on them all together here, does that lock it into all together at the county board meeting? So,
Resolution.
okay, so then,
Well, the current motion is just to exclude, you kind of agreed to consolidate the others. My concern, again, is that we've had precinct consolidations already, and especially in the 13, or wherever we took that from, I believe 17, or wherever that came from. So we've had those. The problem is when you're dealing with the city of Kankakee, they like to be informed, and if I can at least adhere to that consideration, we won't have the problem that we will have with them coming up here and saying they had no idea, you just made this motion, you didn't contact us. Since this has been done today or whatever, and it's not something we talked about in the long run, I'm just saying I'm moving then the minute motion is to move 10 and 13 and 14 and 15 till we have the time to be able to communicate with them. And the rest of them, if you want, I know that Mr. Leary had some concerns about 4. So I'm saying that given that this just happened today, we need to, I will err on the side of caution on those areas where we don't have any discrepancy, move, but in those areas that we may feel some discussions is going to come up, that we need to err on the side of caution, and I'm just asking in the amended motion to move those.
Okay. Mr. Lear.
Mr. Snipes, I might want to ask, if you get favorable response after your communication, would you be prepared to make a motion on the full board floor, including these consolidations?
Oh, yes, if they're favorable, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We have an amendment on the floor that we have to vote on. So do we need is that a roll call vote? Or a voice vote?
Roll call.
Voice vote. Voice vote. All in favor on Mr. Snipes' amendment, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we're gonna go voice vote. Roll call vote, please.
We're voting on the amendment which says that Kankakee.
Chair, let the chair explain.
We are voting on the amendment that said, the Kankakee, what's the polling place numbers? 10 and 13 and 14 and 15 be taken off of
The
combined motion that Miss Dunbar motioned. So, all right. Roll call, please.
Mr. Seroy,
Aye.
Ms. Weber? Nay. Mr. Stauffenberg?
Nay.
Mr. Vickery?
Nay.
Ms. Polk? Aye. Mr. Snipes?
Aye.
Ms. Evans? Nay. Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Peters?
aye.
Ms. Dunbar? Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Motion carries. Motion carries. Okay, now we're gonna go back to our original motion of Miss Dunbar. Is that correct, committee? Is that
Well, it would be
excluding the Kankakee precincts? Okay, let's do another roll call vote. Sorry.
Mr. Seroy,
Aye.
Ms. Weber? Mr. Stauffenberg? Oh, do I? Okay. Mr. Vickery?
Aye.
Ms. Polk? Mr. Snipes?
Aye.
Ms. Evans? Mr. Payton? Ms. Peters?
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar? Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Motion carries. Okay. Thank you. All right. So that will move on to the full board for approval next month, excluding.
Will there be a motion for 10 and 13 and 14 and 15 to be presented on its own?
I believe that it will be, if we bring it back up, it'll be the collective, after we get, some feedback from that area, we are going to,
Was that in, and I'm not trying to, I'm just, for clarification purposes, was that indicated in your motion?
in my motion, it said to remove them.
No, it wasn't indicated.
Right, so as things stands right now, 10 and 13 and 14 and 15 would not be at the June county board meeting?
Right, it wouldn't be at the June.
Okay, so then we wouldn't be doing that this year?
Right.
That's
Okay.
bring it, then we can vote it down if you don't want it.
At this point, yeah, I'm just, yeah.
Well, we
but it's-
could revisit this a year from now.
You can revisit a year from now, yeah.
Ms. Dunbar.
Chairman, can we make a separate motion so that it appears separately on the county board agenda?
Yes, you can.
Can I make that motion, please? That we consolidate Kankakee 10 and 13 and 14 and 15.
Yes, and do we have a second for that motion? Mr. Fairfield? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're putting it to be voted on separately at the county board. So you can voice your opinion. If you'll have some time, it'll still be on the docket then.
Just send it to the county board.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So we just separated the two, okay?
Okay. Not to take much more of your time, just a few things for housekeeping purposes. Obviously, all of you have gotten your tax bills by now. We rolled to the treasurer on the 25th. Our tax reports are online on our website. I'd like to tip my hat to my tax extension coordinator, Linda Settle. She did a phenomenal job in getting those to the treasurer in a timely fashion. Not only timely, but more importantly, accurately. So wanted to publicly acknowledge her work in that. Just a few dates. We will be at the senior fair on June 15th doing voter registrations. We will have equipment demo following the community services meeting on June 19th. Just as a reminder to all of you, please stop down at the second floor conference room. We're going to be having a voter equipment demonstration for you. And our office will be at the Bourbonnais Friendship Festival on the 22nd, 23rd, registering voters. So I'm done unless anybody's got any.
Oh, I think Mr. Snipes has something.
Yeah, just something. Could I get a copy of or just get the names of those individuals that are in 14 and 15 and then 10 and 13 on the precinct, our current precinct list, who the judges are in that areas, not the judges, the precinct committeemen in those areas.
You should know.
I know one of
ones
them, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but the other one.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Henderson or Lori? Seeing none, have a great day.
815-937-2990. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Next on our docket is Animal Control, Miss Julie Boudreau. Need a motion for her monthly report. Mrs. Evans with a first and Miss Dunbar with a second. All in favor? All opposed? Monthly report is approved. Good morning, Julie.
Give you this report. Good morning, all. Are there any questions on the report? I think last month I had indicated that the registration was a little bit low, that we had a lot of these changes and that you would see it come up this month. So I just wanted to point that out, that the registration line is up for the month and as well for the year. Our bites are down for the year. We've handled some bats really since January, where it's really very quiet usually. Bat season comes more into the summer. August is always a high bat season. I'm saddened to report that we've had our first positive bat this year already. That'll be reported on the May, reflected on the May report. But this individual, the entire family, there's a husband, wife, 2 small children, which the entire family had to undergo rabies treatment. The bat was, he thought his wife was brushing his arm, and they were asleep in bed, and it was a bat, and it bit him. There was a child also, I think, in bed with them, a little one. So the whole family had to undergo those treatments. And that individual was concerned with West Niles, and we said, no, it's not West Niles, it's rabies, which we're happy that there's a treatment out there to safeguard that family. So, and we're a little bit surprised. I don't know if I should say this out loud or not. Our cat numbers are still very low for this time of year. Exactly. So, we're happy to see that, and I know there's a lot of efforts being made out there for spay and neuter, all over the county. And we had applied for a grant to try to help promote a cat indoor campaign. We were not selected for that grant. I think there were 700 grant applicants, but it's still something I think I'd like to pursue in the fall. The pretense is not only with TNR measures being done around the county, that the actual concentrating on the source where these cats come from. They've come from homes, get discarded out, then pretty soon they kind of revert back to a feral state, or then they're reproducing wild kittens. So I think if you're hitting it from both ends, it'll be more effective. I've always thought that a great program would be bringing it into the school systems, engaging the children to help get the message out of responsible pet ownership, increasing the value of that cat, and putting that message out there of spay and neuter. So that's something we're going to work on in the fall with the new school year. Any other questions on the report? A couple other items I have on the agenda. Our software that had changed, or that we had added to, trying to get this portal program to work efficiently. Every animal hospital out there has different software, which is different from our software. So depending on what each software's abilities are, it's not always the same and consistent. So I think that the portal program, while it sounds really great on paper, and I think it can work, stumbling block was where they would have to make it efficient and make less work on the hospitals and on animal control. They would have had to upload a rabies certificate, and they can't just do that from their software program. They can't, they'd have to try to scan it and save it, and it's just more steps. It's not saving them any work. I'm not trying to cause them more work. So I had talked to the Department of Ag, Dr. Ernst, down there in how a rabies certificate is submitted to us. One of the hospitals that does a good volume
of work had actually given me a report. This is only one page, but it's a report of several people listed, and all of the information that we have on our current rabies certificates. If any of you have pets and you've received a rabies certificate, it's a small square certificate and it's got your name and the pet name and all of that on it. Well, this gives us that same information. I thought that had to be approved through the Department of Ag. And you know, when you read the Animal Control Act, it does indeed say on a certificate approved by your board. So not only can we collect all this information in a report of this manner, that instead of the animal hospital having to upload something, they can enter the information electronically, which will go into our client's file, but they can hit verify instead of upload, and then they can just email us a monthly report in which we can keep on file, and then we will have our own rabies certificate if somebody needs one or we need to show proof of something. So I guess I would have to ask the committee and get this approved by the board to change our format or our official rabies certificate. Collecting the same information, just in a different manner.
Mrs. Peters.
I will make that motion.
Thank you.
Mrs. Polk with a second. Mrs. Peters with the first. Mrs. Polk with a second. All in favor of changing the format of the rabies certificate to the current format, which would allow a verification and other than just the whole certificate and then the certificate mailed afterwards?
Yes, it would be collected more in a report, a monthly electronic report.
Okay.
Yes.
Everybody understand that part of it? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you. The other information that I wanted to let the committee know about is some employee needs. We have a couple openings. One of our kennel techs, she had been there, I think 6 years this month, and she has a young family, and she found a different job that just met the needs of her family a little bit better. So we have an opening there. One of our animal control officers, while she hasn't quite been with us 2 years, she's been a bit of a rock star. She's really jumped in and excelled very well. I actually thought she was punking me when she came in to tell me that she had another job offer. She wasn't looking to leave us because, you know, you always think that, oh gosh, why are we, you know, losing employees? She really wasn't looking to leave us at all. She likes her job. She wants to stay involved and volunteer and help bark, but she had a job offer from Petting House, which is a pretty good offer. This was a job that is in her wheelhouse with the degree that she has, and she had applied there back in 2016. So really happy for her, a little sad for us, but we also have an opening for a full-time officer. One other need that I want to discuss, our clerical person years ago was a full-time person, and over the last, oh gosh, since 2010 maybe, it's been, we didn't have anybody, and then we had, you know, kind of a part-time person, and that's where it's at right now, is a part-time clerical person, which, you know, our office is open 6 days a week. So that leaves us with 3 days out of the 6 that we do not have a clerical person at all. It can make it a bit difficult, especially we do not close for lunch, so we're open all day. If you've got all officers in the field, you've got a shelter manager that may be transporting animals so that, you know, we can move these animals, it leaves the office really short-handed. If there's any training opportunities, we've got Prairie States coming up in June, and sometimes I miss opportunities on being able to send people for certain training because I still got to cover the office, or we can't participate in Saturday events because then I can't keep my office open. So it makes it a little bit difficult. I'd really like to ask permission to add an additional part-time clerical person. The current clerical person is not wanting to go full-time. She had thought about it, but at this time she doesn't want to do that. Having an additional part-time person would really benefit the office. I don't think it would put an extra burden on the county because there's not the benefits and insurance and things like that that would impact the general county. And I think that I had enough money in my budget. Well, I didn't budget for it this year. I had enough money in my budget last year, surplus, that would have covered this. And I wrote these figures down here. As well as this year, I really underestimated. I tried to come in under, knowing that we had raised some fees. I still wanted to come in way under. So from my expenses to my expected revenue, I'm like 86,000 under this year. I'm to hire a part-time clerical person at this point, since we're about halfway through the year. We're talking maybe $3,600 this year, maybe $7,800 for a full year for a part-time person. So I'd like to ask the committee for that permission to add an additional part-time clerical person.
Okay. Mr. Snipes?
As far as the individuals that's leaving and all that, I mean, that's within your purview. You don't really have to come to us for that because that's under your budget. The question I have now is whether or not, if it's in your budget, and because of the minimum amount, is it anything that would have to move to finance?
I think we should probably
as
move
far as
this to
that,
finance for
and
the
then
additional person.
For the, that's what I was saying, for the additional individual, even though you have the revenue, you can make the case kind of with them. So I would just entertain a motion to just move it to finance. And if it's feasible, because I have no objection, I think you should have it.
Okay.
Thank you. I figured it had to go through some channels.
Mrs. Peters with a second. All in favor of moving the clerical person, the part-time clerical person to finance, by saying aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, there you go.
I have.
All right.
Thank you.
Anything else? Hold on. Anything else for Julie?
I just wondered if the two rules that we passed about swap shops and pet shops, have you had to enforce those? Are there still dogs out at the swap shop?
Well, the last swap meet was the Sunday prior to the board meeting. Yes, it was loaded with dogs, a few cats. We didn't see tons of litters, but a lot of dogs. There were some concerns that there were foxes there. I had that concern that there were foxes there available. I asked the individuals to show me their license, and they couldn't do that. I have reached out to Department of Ag, Department of Natural Resources with those concerns. There's only so much I can do on that front as far as some of these other type of animals. The night before the swap, officer was called out for a cage of animals in the middle of is it Riverview Parkway there by the Southside Walmart? Am I saying that name of that road right? And there was a cage of 4 chickens. On there was a sign that said $40 a pair. I would bet pretty strongly that that cage of chickens was headed to the swap and probably fell off of a truck.
Oh.
Wasn't that the Kentucky Fried Chicken there?
Oh, they missed their mark. We currently, since and I have to say I think that there's a correlation between this, but we've had 2 swap meets. Started April, May. We currently have 10 chickens in our shelter. 8 hens, 2 roosters, 3 roosters, I believe, 7 hens. But it's, really, it's kind of funny. You go in there and you expect to hear dogs and cats, and you hear a lot of clucking and crowing. And so we're trying to find places for all of these chickens. 4 more were dumped in a driveway in Bradley, sick chickens over the weekend. So, while we worked on that language for dogs and cats, and I'm happy that we did, and we'll see how that works when the June swap comes. But certainly there's room for improvement on the swap overall, and I do believe we're certainly housing a lot of birds that
Who's getting the eggs?
Right now they're not laying very well, but
Might be why they were available.
maybe.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Boudreau? Seeing none.
Thank you. Have a great week.
You too. Do I have any old business to come before the committee? Any old business? Do I have any new business to come before the committee? Any new business? Mr. Snipes?
In the spirit of my seatmate Michael Lejesh, I make a motion that we adjourn.
So moved. Mrs. Evans with a second. All in favor of adjournment? Aye. Have a good day, everybody.